August 4, 2014, the 216th day of the year. There are 149 days remaining until the end of 2014. On this day in 1969, at the apartment of French intermediary Xuan Thuy in Paris, American Representative Henry Kissinger and North Vietnamese Representative Xuan Thuy begin secret peace negotiations. Viet Minh is formed in 1941, led by Ho Chi Minh as an independence movement for the liberation of Vietnam from the French colonial empire. In power in that Southeast Asian country since the late 19th century, extracting tobacco, indigo, tea, coffee from a French-administered plantation system. Like anybody, anywhere, the Vietnamese are not comfortable with the French exploitation, although they don't mind the baguettes, the wine, the French colonial architecture, the sidewalk bistros. Plus, in 1940, here come the Japanese with their East Asian co-prosperity sphere, which essentially means anything of any value whatsoever belongs to the Jays. And as for you guys, you can work for them for nothing. And in return, they won't shoot you. And they'll take care of your women for you, too. The Japanese let the French stay because the new French bosses are Vichy, Nazi collaborators, and the Jays are axis of evil mates with the Nazis. Long story short, 1945, the Jays go home, the Vichy are hung and stretched as war criminals. Viet Minh turns its full attention on the French until 1954, when the French are thoroughly trounced. Well, massacred and mutilated, really, at a little place in the mountains called Dien Bien Phu. That's when the Americans step in because, after all, the plantation system is well in place, and Americans know a little bit about plantation culture. Cut to 1969, after a quick montage of images: the Gulf of Tonkin, napalming the kids, My Lai, the Tet Offensive, Kent State, and Dr. Kissinger meets North Vietnamese Foreign Minister Xuan Thuy in that Paris apartment. Xuan Thuy, he's got street cred. He came up in the late 1930s and 40s as a young terrorist. He's 14 when he joins up with Viet Minh, just a little shaver. And at 16, he's doing time. He spends 6 years in the penal colony at Con Son Island in the South China Sea, and he stays busy there editing his little commie newspaper, just mocking the crap out of the imperialists. When he gets out, he's fluent in French and Chinese. Circulation of his paper is through the roof. He's a hero. Dr. Kissinger, you know, seriously sick bastard, Harvard, known war criminal, loves a crowded cocktail party. A dumpy guy with weak eyes and unconked hair and a strange love accent. He thinks he's catnip for the ladies, too cool for school. Somehow, today, this guy is still alive, not in prison. He's 91 now. He's a national security advisor, Secretary of State with Nixon, Ford. And it's on this day in Paris in 1969. Outside, you got your smoking hot French women in their summer dresses, stroking along the Champs-Élysées. A whole bunch of angry anti-capitalist students building barricades, tear gas, sadistic French cops still frustrated about Algeria, new wave filmmakers shooting everything that moves, the whole sick scene. Remembering correctly, the beverage choice might have been the first sticking point in negotiations. Xuan Thuy wants green tea. Dr. Kissinger wants black coffee with those little buttered toast triangles he loves. It's just a mess. Somehow, despite all these liabilities, 4 years later, Dr. Kissinger is waving a piece of paper and talking about peace is at hand. He makes big lead headlines on front pages around the world, but doesn't even seem to notice how Chamberlainian he sounds. Nixon wants peace with honor, which means we admit we're beaten and we give up, and that's what Nixon gets. Except for the mocking part, no one can help themselves. It's humiliating. On this day in 1975, the Japanese Red Army takes more than 50 hostages in the AIA building housing several embassies in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The gunmen hope to win the release of 5 imprisoned comrades and fly them to Libya. The JRA seeks to overthrow the Japanese government and monarchy and to promote a worldwide people's revolution. JRA, organized in 1971 by Shigenobu Fusako, at one time labeled by attention-craving critics the most feared female terrorist in the world. In 1971, fresh out of Meiji University, Shigenobu has what it takes to succeed: smarts, beauty, ambition, and stubbornness inherited from her father, a former schoolteacher and major in the Imperial Japanese Army stationed in Manchuria during World War II. Shigenobu organizes several successful international actions, most notoriously the Lod Airport attack in Tel Aviv, Israel, now Ben Gurion International Airport, during which 26 people die by gunfire and hand grenades. 1 of 3 JRA members in the attack commits suicide by grenade. Another is caught in the crossfire and killed. The surviving JRA member, Okamoto Kozo, is imprisoned in Israel. In September 1977, the Japanese Red Army hijacks Japan Airlines Flight 472 over India and forces it to land in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The Japanese government frees 6 imprisoned members of JRA and allegedly pays a $6 million ransom. That's a bingo. In April 1988, JRA members bombed the USO club in Naples, Italy, killing 5. That same month, a JRA member is arrested on the New Jersey Turnpike with a potato sack full of explosives in the trunk of the rental car he's driving. He's tried and convicted, put away. On this day in 1975, JRA takes 53 hostages at the American Insurance Associates building in Kuala Lumpur, including high profilers the American consul Robert Stebbins, a couple officers from the Swedish embassy, a handful of Australians, an American guy who just happened to stop by for a cup of coffee. They want the Japanese government to release several imprisoned JRA members, which they do, sending them to Kuala Lumpur on an airliner which the terrorists then take to Libya, where our late pal Muammar Gaddafi puts them up and shows them the sights. No one's hurt, JRA gets what it wants, the Malaysians and the Japanese governments are humiliated. Except, 15 years later in the Y2K, Shigenobu makes the mistake of thinking she can go back to Japan after 30 years in the Middle East. The cops close in on her in Osaka. She goes on trial in Tokyo, and they sentence her to 20 years, which in Japan means 20 years, although in her case, it's more like life because of those malignant tumors in her gut. She's a tough one. She's only got another 6 years inside. Maybe the chemo will work. Among other books, she writes My Love, My Revolution, and Jasmine in the Muzzle of a Gun, collected poems of Shigenobu Fusako. American author Norman Mailer writes, any war that requires the suspension of reason as a necessity for support is a bad war. From Rutland, Vermont, this is Richard Alcott speaking.